gradual journey into Cabernet Sauvignon magnificence. Hi, welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine, presented by Pick and Pay, and welcome to Soweto. That's where I find myself this week, dropping in for the first time at the Eyethu Lifestyle Centre, and this, the Eyethu Cellar Door, which is awash with wine. It's a place where you'll find everything from some FMC by Ken Forrester to a range of different wines from the House of Rupert. There's some assorted distillers. It's a really cool selection in a really cool place. It screams noise and energy and colour and life. And it's somewhere I suspect I'll be coming back to visit because I'm doing plenty of visiting at the moment, including wine bars, probably my favourite thing to do at the moment, and the home of wine bars at the moment. I think not just in South Africa, but pretty much the world has to be Stellenbosch. You can't walk 3 feet without a new wine bar opening in Stellenbosch, so I went and visited half a dozen of them and then sat down with the chair of Stellenbosch Wine Routes, Mike Ratcliffe, to find out just why wine bars are exploding across Stellenbosch. If you've been into Stellenbosch of late, you can't walk more than 3 feet without tumbling over a wine bar. It has become the wine bar capital of certainly South Africa, probably Africa, and with not a bad shout at the rest of the world, really. But it's not just one after the other that all look and feel identical. There's a real individuality to all of them, and together they make for what's probably the coolest wine stumble through any town there is on the planet. And if you're going to do that, then who better to do it with than somebody who stumbles through the world of wine on a daily basis with a fair degree of success. Good friend of mine, a good friend of Dan Really Likes Wine, Mike Ratcliffe. Hello.
Hey Dan, and hi to everybody out there.
Yeah, we both love Stellenbosch. You've got a slightly more vested interest than I do as chairman of Stellenbosch Wine Routes and Tourism. Just over the last little while, I get the sense that the wine bars in this town have gone mad, and quite wonderfully so.
Yeah, and I think it's a natural progression. If you go to any of the great wine regions of the world, from Melbourne to Bordeaux, Napa Valley, you'll find that those towns with a rich wine culture have an abundance of wine bars where you can go and experience all the wines of the local region. And I think that natural progression has just finally caught up in Stellenbosch, and perhaps it's going a bit crazy.
Now, by and large, they seem to be split into two rough groupings. There are the wine bars that refer to a specific estate. There's Q-Bar from Quoin Rock, you've got Bartney, you've got Plaisir, you've got Brampton, and then you get those that are a little more broader in scope, such as where we are here at Le Grand Domaine. So you've got the chance of either getting a real feel for a particular estate or brand, or just going for the whole space.
Yeah, it's wonderful, and there's something for everybody. There's something at every price point. Some of them are pure wine bars. Here we can get a lovely cheese platter, charcuterie, and some of them are full-blown restaurants as well. So I think there is a huge amount of diversity, and also a huge number of wines by the glass. There simply is no better place to go and explore and to experiment and try all those wines that you haven't tried before.
Now, it takes nothing away from the wine route, the actual traveling from estate to state, finding yourself in a place where that wine actually comes from, where it's made, has got a real magic, a real authenticity to it. But that said, if you are in Stellenbosch for the day or you're here on a holiday, it is a wonderful way to be able to take in rather a lot of wine in rather a short space of time.
And it just adds to the richness of the offering. I guess you can call it an experience in the same way that you could go visit different wine bars or wineries during the day, and in the evening visit different wine bars. So it's definitely not one or the other. I think it definitely adds to the richness of the offering, and people are looking for experiences. That is the common denominator of the rise of Stellenbosch tourism, is people are asking for and finding experiences.
It's been a tough time for the whole world over the last couple of years. Tourism and wine, pretty high up on the list of things that have taken a battering. So how important is it for Stellenbosch in particular, but I think by extension the broader South African wine space, that you get somewhere like Stellenbosch and its wine bars up and running and really focused as tourist central in terms of coming in, drinking wine and being part of this wine culture?
Well, COVID has been tough across the board, and I don't think we can ever take anything away from that. But I think the resilience of Stellenbosch as a town, and frankly, the patriotism of Stellenbosch, has allowed Stellenbosch to bounce back very, very quickly. We now have more restaurants than we did pre-COVID. Certainly, the number of wine bars is a whole new wave of innovation that's hit the town. So people do fight back. We are an innovative people in South Africa, and we are fighting back. But to answer your question, it's critically important that we continue to develop ourselves as not just the wine capital of South Africa, but also a foodie destination. And what better way to do it than to be able to go and have all these great experiences and to get a broad view on what's going on in this rather big region.
I was chatting a little earlier today to that wonderful woman who, for reasons none of us can understand, decided to marry you. And Mrs. Ratcliffe was saying with a forced smile that it was, I think, 8 or 9 nights in a row that the Ratcliffes were heading out on the town, because I think you just get proper FOMO if you didn't. There seems to be so much going on in Stellenbosch at the moment.
There's an incredible buzz in the town. The students are back as well. Never underestimate the students. We are delighted to see the students not just pouring tequila down their faces and beer. We are finding that the bars are starting to get filled up with students as well, which is wonderful. There's also been a new innovation in town where we are starting to see wine bars stretching out onto the pavements, which is a very European thing. But if you walk through Stellenbosch in the evening, the pavements are full of tables. The tables are full of revelers. They're having a great time, and every one of them, slowly but surely, becomes an ambassador for the wines of Stellenbosch.
As indeed, I think, do the bars themselves. And if I look around now, we're here in Le Grand Domaine. It's beautifully appointed. There's clearly a lot of care, a lot of time that's gone into creating this space. These are not just rooms that sell wine. There's a huge sense of identity to them, a huge sense of creating a space that speaks to what the owner or the developer is trying to create. And this is just one of many. But it really is. It's somewhere you want to go out of your way to come and visit.
These are brand homes. So it's the best way to influence your consumer, give them a feeling what your brand is all about, and allow them to create indelible memories. And those memories are what keeps them buying wines from Stellenbosch over and over into the future. And I think it's having a great impact. I also don't think that this is the end. I think this is the beginning of where we're going. The outdoor culture, restaurants and bars spilling out onto the streets, festivals, a huge series of events. The town is coming to life, and I would also like to think that a part of that is the fact that our tourism community is very much united and working towards a single goal of raising standards in Stellenbosch and make it that much more attractive to wine and food lovers, but also tourists in general.
There are many factors that fit into that broader tourism play, but it's wine that sits happily at the heartbeat. You and I are both drinking some Cabernet Sauvignon from Stellenbosch. Is it going forward a continued focus that Stellenbosch is Cabernet world and then there are other wines, or are you trying to juggle what I think most of our wine regions are in South Africa at the moment, which is we're actually making lots of stuff that's really good?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I have a very clear answer on that. Is the purpose of the Stellenbosch Wine Route Board is to nurture Stellenbosch wine in general. And if particular strengths come to the fore, we'll climb behind those. And make no mistake, Cabernet has become a particular strength of Stellenbosch, but it's not all defining. It doesn't define what Stellenbosch is. We have producers that are making exceptional wines from Shiraz to Pinotage to Chenin Blanc, Sauvignon Blanc, and don't forget Bordeaux blends in Stellenbosch. It's a thing. But as we stand now, Cabernet Sauvignon has risen to the top of the pile as one of our strengths. It's become recognized as such, I would say globally, and it's such a wonderful strength. Cabernet is the king, and everybody loves Cabernet.
I'll correct you on one thing there. You mentioned the Bordeaux blends in Stellenbosch. I'd like to think that in Bordeaux they're making some very nice Stellenbosch blends. I'm still in a minority in that, but I'm attempting to work on it and get it into the common language.
It's great that they're coming around to our way of thinking.
Difficult one for you here as we launch into a splendid charcuterie platter here at Le Grand Domaines ahead of finishing off some rather nice Cabernet Sauvignon. I've seen you on your Triumph motoring through the streets of Stellenbosch, very hipster, Mr. Ratcliffe. You have got so many to choose from in your position. Difficult to pick out specific ones, but there must be a couple that you would suggest to people. It's got something different. It's got something a bit unique. Go and have a look. You won't be disappointed.
Well, I'm not going to fall into that trap because I'll get myself into terrible trouble, but certainly for every occasion, there is a wonderful offering. And something that we're working hard on right now actually is to create a wine bar passport for Stellenbosch, where you can actually have a passport, and as you go from bar to bar, you get it stamped. And at the end of that, you go into a lucky draw to win something. So, and as we see that, there are more and more wine bars coming to the fore. Even Bertus Besson Spek and Boom is converting itself into a wine bar at the moment. So, no, I don't have a favorite. I feel that the town is really blessed to have a really rich offering.
Oh, you diplomat, you. Like, it sounds like a passport I need to get. I'm currently working on a couple of passports, but it sounds like this one might be the most important. There's such a dynamic energy to Stellenbosch at the moment, and it bodes well after some difficult times. Before we clear up this charcuterie and say goodbye to the Grand Domain, what is Mike Ratcliffe, in capacity as chair of Stellenbosch Wine Routes, chair of Stellenbosch Tourism, what are you most excited about for now?
I think that's pretty easy to answer. As chair, I don't really do anything other than nurture people to go into a particular direction, and preferably for people to move in the same direction. So that's really my job. I think what we've seen post-COVID is that the unity and the structures and the organization that is Visit Stellenbosch and Stellenbosch Wine Route has stood up to the onslaught of COVID. And we are at a position now where we are able to not have to sit down and form a lekgotla to set up a committee to talk about our strategy. In 2022, we are implementing. We are implementing all the plans we've got, and we have this unity, we have this great organization, and we're connected very strongly with municipality and university. So I think there's every reason to be positive. I think there's every reason to believe that we can have some ongoing success in 2022.
And there is every reason to get to Stellenbosch, not just for the many reasons mentioned there by Mike, but because there is nowhere with a greater concentration of cool, high quality, fun wine bars to drop in on. They've all got a USP, they're all a little bit different, but they're connected by a love of wine, some great people running them, and the chance to try out some world-class Stellenbosch wine. And if you're not sure which one to look out for, well, just cast a glance up or down a street in Stellenbosch. Look out for a middle-aged man in a slightly too tight t-shirt and a Triumph motorbike. Follow Mr. Ratcliffe and you'll be good. Cheers.
Just done.
Some very appealing 3-litre bottles of Flagstone Pinotage, as there's some very appealing glasses of wine right across Stellenbosch. So whether it's Soweto or the heart of the winelands, there's some really cool urban wine routes to be done. There's also a really cool prize to be won at the moment, and this one is really, really simple. All you need to do is jump onto our social media channels, and you could be winning a great prize from Bellingham. And all you'll need to do is jump onto our social media channels and their social media channels, tell us why you should be winning the prize, and voila, it could be yours. Speaking of the guys who make this fabulous wine, the chair of DGB is Tim Hutchinson. Now, he's a man who could have been an all-star athlete, but instead tumbled into the liquor industry and now looks back on a fabulous career in the world of wine. One of my favourite things about the wine world is cellars, not just the huge big ones on estates where you can spend hours and hours trying to hide from security while tapping into vintage stuff, but finding people's own personal cellars, cellars that tell stories, have a real sense of history, a real sense of personality. And that is exactly what I have found here. I'm at the home of Tim Hutchinson, the chair of DGB, and a man with an extraordinary history in the world of not just wine, but spirits as well. And yet the story could have been very different, because Tim, as I thank you for inviting me into your home and into your cellar, this could have been very different. My other show is obviously the Dan Nicholl Show. I could have been interviewing you as a famous South African cricketer.
Yeah, if I'd made the grade, yes. No, so cricket, a passion of mine still, but it didn't pay the rent.
What has, though, is this world you find yourself as such a central part of here in South Africa and beyond. What were the early days like? How did you find your way into this world of wine and spirits?
Well, funny enough, it was I got a call from Peter Dove, who was the head of Pick and Pay, to say, look, Cursav, Sol Kerzner, Saf Marine, they're big in hotels and shipping and all sorts of things. They have a little wine business, and they want to get someone who understands consumer goods brands to head it. And obviously I heard the name Kerzner, and my ears pricked up. I flew to Joburg, I joined them. And little Douglas Green of Paarl had been started by Dougie Green in Paarl in the mid-40s, just after the war. And so it was a little business, and it was doing very well. St. Augustine was the first wine brand on TV, where, the boss was coming to dinner, and the guy lovingly pulls out this bottle of wine, looks at it, and then the phone rings. Sorry, the boss's wife's ill, he can't make dinner. And the guy says, thank goodness. He opens it and drinks it himself. But so that was it. We didn't have our own winery. The wines were produced by the KWV, and that was, KWV was then basically an extension of government, and it inhibited the wine industry. I remember going to the KWV to try and get our pressing quota increased when we got into wineries, and the answer was no. And so it was as Dick Goss, who was the chairman, said, in those days we basically gave the emerging market, the township market, to the beer guys on a plate. But no, it was tough early days. Then we merged with Union Wine. They had Bellingham. Bellingham really at that time was all about Johannesburg, which was 120,000 cases plus, and Premier Grand Cru. Douglas Green and Union Wine both had Premier Grand Crus. And those were massive brands on every wine list. And then obviously one wanted to premiumize. So eventually I phased out Johannesburg and Grand Cru, and we built a premium winery, and had some great winemakers, developed the Bernard series to make higher end offerings, and we effectively, a painful process to move price points, to discontinue family favorites wasn't popular, but those brands held back the image of the brand. So then we moved on with acquisitions. Bosch & Doll obviously was a big one, and Anglo had neglected Bosch. I love brands, so for me it was like inheriting some new children. And there we, I think the credit, and the one thing Jacques Roux and myself are very proud of, Dame P. Bailey said the refurb and the upgrading of Bosch & Doll in both wines and in packaging and image was the best he'd ever seen in South Africa. And God bless his soul, he's no longer with us, but we considered him an icon. So that was a great, the development of 1685 range. Then we put on top of that the Appellation wines. We bought those vineyards in Elgin, where we had great Pinot Noir, great Chardonnay. And then the Black Angus and the Nicholas. I mean, in 2 weeks' time, we are taking, in Pretoria and Johannesburg, motorway hoardings on Nicholas with one word, perfection, aimed at the new emerging market. And I couldn't have dreamt 35 years ago that we'd ever get wine to that stage. But, it's very exciting that the young black consumers very interested in wine, and wine's seen as premium and image driven, And then, I could go on all the brands, but, the Brampton was a great acquisition. We're drinking the Roxton Black. When we bought Brampton was a second brand to Rustenburg. And Peter Barlow, his real passion was cattle. And Brampton was his best bull he imported. It came from Brampton in Canada. So anyway, we acquired the brand, and we were very friendly with the Barlows, great people. And I said, no, we need a premium offering here. And so I went back to Simon Barlow and said, can you tell me another good bull he had? He said, no, his second best bull was Roxton. So we came with Roxton, and then Roxton Black is, because we're very conscious of terroir and securing top-end vineyards. And Stellenbosch is the Napa Valley of the Cape. So,
Well, cheers to that, and cheers to the Braxton, and a
Good
wonderful story in 35 great years. I'm going to pose two very challenging questions to you, because over 35 years, there are myriad answers, I have no doubt. So if not the definitive, then certainly a couple that fit into the bracket. Over those 35 years, the moment you look back on that was the most challenging, the most difficult in this long and winding career of yours, and then the one that put the biggest smile on your face?
I think the the early days with Graham Beck and Kersaf, when we merged Douglas Green and Union Wine. Union Wine was losing a lot of money. They were massive they had production plants in PE, in Oudtshoorn, in Douglas, producing very sweet, high volume wines. And I mean big volumes, 80, 90, 120,000 cases of very cheap wines. Was trying to put those two businesses together, and you had a corporate in Kersaf who were running casinos and etc. Didn't understand our business, and Graham Beck, who was a coal miner, and a man I got very, very close to, and I could have a 20-minute show. When the old man died, 7:02 phoned me, and I had half an hour just talking about the old man. But when those two mergers came together, both parties wanted me to select their senior execs, and I had to compromise. I wasn't always selecting and so we went through 3 or 4 years of really tough. Then I did the management buyout, the rest is really history. But that was really tough. I guess the highlight would have been, when we pretty recently when Brait got into difficulty with Christo Visa. They made some ill-advised investments in the UK and ran out of cash and decided I had sold out my shares. It was time for me to move on probably. But then they wanted to sell the business, and a couple of names came up, and I said, no, I've got 500 people, from seller hands to marketing people to market managers all over the world. I've got a great team of people. 60% of our staff have been with the company 10 years and longer. This last week, I was giving 25, 35 and 40-year awards, long service awards. Then I thought, no, this can't happen. I spoke to a dear friend of mine in London, Chad Smart, and I said, Chad, let's buy the business back. And we did a good deal with Brait, who were great partners of mine for many, many years, especially in the early days when if I went to a bank and wanted to borrow 5,000 Rand, they'd say, who are you? And they probably still are wanting to know who I am. But anyway, and I must pay a big tribute to Graham Beck, who was a mentor and a dear friend of mine for many years. But when we bought the business back, we were able to put the business into good hands. I agreed to stay in for a while. We've got a great new team, executive team, all the young bucks running the business. And that's my highlight. I see how well the business is doing. Our winemakers, most of them are very proud of what they're achieving. And, this philosophy, I really made premiumization a huge goal 5 or 6 years ago. And that sounds quite a business school thing to say. But the financial commitment to be tying up premium vineyards, to be sticking wine in barrels for, 3 or 4 years, 5 years, and then the winemakers don't want bottle shock, so we leave it in the bottle for another year. That could age any good accountant. I can't read and write, so it goes over my head. But that's really what I think, for me, I've been so proud of.
It's clearly a very successful business, and there are many strands to that success. I think people are key to them, and I know so many of them, and I've had great times with many of them. The brands, though, you've already expressed your love of brands. One of the first South African wine brands I encountered was the St. Augustine. We used to get it for our parents for Christmas, which they loved growing up in Zimbabwe. Baxberg, you've recently acquired. That's where I got married. So a lot of those brands speak to me very personally. And I sense that that's been a big part of how you've constructed the success, understanding those brands and making them key to the stories you tell to really touch consumers.
Yeah, and I think a lot of young marketing people have told me 10, 15 years ago, brands have life cycles. That's a lot of hogwash. If you've got a brand that's around a family, young consumers want to know a story behind a brand. They want to know about a family. Let's just use Baxberg as an example, or Douglas Green. I remember Dougie saying when he was a young man in the late 40s after the war, his old man said to him, your only job is to go around looking for second-hand bottles because there was a glass shortage. You go around every bottle store, every trash heap, getting bottles, coming back, washing them, trying to sell the wine. The Backs, what a lovely family. Michael and Simon and the family. They've got such a story to tell. And when you see us reveal our new Baxberg, the family become a bigger part of it. The stories around Sydney and his father getting off a boat from Lithuania at the 1903, I think it was, being a porter in the Cape Town harbour, ending up owning a butcher shop in Paarl, swapping the butcher shop for a farm, Sydney going in a horse and cart to Simondium Primary School. And that's priceless stuff. And the family are still involved. I've asked Simon to sit on the Backsburg Family Wines. That's the new name of the company, Family Wines, because I want to emphasize this is a family business with great stories to tell. And I think we've got their route to market and maybe a couple of skills in certain areas where we can add. But, that's for me is priceless. And Dan, for me, if I look back, and I wish I was 21 again, the best thing about the industry is the most unbelievable people we work and deal with. I could rattle them off, but, the Dampy Baileys, the Johan Krickers, the Sput Sperlings, the Graham Bunzars, the Frans Malans, they're gems. Neil Ellis, they're friends. I was with Johan Kricker of Kanonkop. The brand speaks for itself, and we helped them with distribution in South Africa. But we were reminiscing about the early days, and I think we as an industry, we're not show ponies, and we probably keep our light a little under the bushel. You won't see me interviewed too often, and that's by design. My brands are what I want to talk about, not me.
That said, I think we're going to need to come back to the cellar because there are clearly so many more stories to tell. But for now, I want to leave with a look forward. We've looked back, and wonderfully so. But over the next 5-10 years, where does DGB go? Where does South African wine go in an ideal world?
It's a good question. I think it has to go premium. We're faced with, this year, I'll give you an example. Your average winery is going to have a 14% inflation. Glass, labels. I mean, we can't get imported papers. We can't. The capsule delivery times have gone out 3 or 4 weeks. So, if you want to be in the value offering business, you won't make it. We're going to have to premiumize, which fortunately we're way down the road, and there's going to be less premium wine available. So you have to keep the good vines in. To think people are pulling up 50-year-old vines is just ludicrous. And the future is simple. We're going to have to compete at far higher price points. And I'll give you a silly example. The average wine in the UK sells from South Africa from about $8 to about $14. I have some dear friends who live in San Diego, made a lot of money in the fuel industry. I say, what is your quaffing wine you buy? They say, well, we buy wines to keep in the fridge, have on a Friday. We shop in the $20 to $50 bracket. When we want a good wine to show off to friends, we're above $100. South Africa, not in those price points in America. That's where we've got to go. But what an opportunity. We've got a great story to tell. We've got the best, the head of Southcorp Australia once said to me, Tim, I don't know about your wines, but you have the best backdrop scenery in the world. I said, well, the wines aren't bad either.
They certainly aren't, and neither are the people in our industry, and you've touched on them so many times, but you're certainly one of them, and thank you for 35 wonderful years.
Thank you.
We're a little sad we didn't see you get those first-class hundreds and all those wickets, but I think the reward in turn has been great. So thank you for the time. Thanks for spending it in the cellar, and we look forward to the future of both DGB and South African wine.
Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Go.
Cheers.
Cheers. Well, thanks, Tim Hutchinson. A great character and part of the fabric of South African wine for 3 decades and more. And that wraps us up for this week. Don't forget that there is the chance to win that super wine prize, so do jump onto our social media channels. And if you have the chance, get down here to the Eyethu Lifestyle Centre in Soweto, the Eyethu cellar door. Looking behind me, there's some Melas Rubicon, a range of Durbanville Hills, the Chenin and Sauvignon Blanc. But McGregor has found its way to Soweto. So a really cool range from high-end to stuff that's a lot more accessible price-wise, and a place that's full of people. It's normally loads of music. They've very kindly switched it off just for us, but a place I'm going to spend the rest of the afternoon at. And in fact, you'll see more of this next week when we drink some brandy in the heart of Soweto. For now, thanks for watching Dan Really Likes Wine, presented by Pick n Pay. See you again next week. Goodbye.